Well, sticking with tech, this time Apple gets a big warning from the street. Now, Citi is out with a call on the tech giant saying that iPhone sales could be cut in half thanks to President Trump's trade war. Dan Roberts is here. And Dan, you've gone through this note. They're saying that we know that China represents about 18% of Apple's sales. If that's cut in half, that could have big implications for the company.
Absolutely. And none of this should come as a big surprise. I mean, for a while there, a couple months ago, Tim Cook had kind of correctly steered the narrative away from this. And he managed to convince a lot of people that they shouldn't be so worried about Apple's iPhone sales in China, but the truth is they probably should be. This is only one Citi analyst for now that is sounding as bearish as he is, which is, predicting that iPhone sales will be cut in half. But I think you might see a lot of other analysts follow suit. I mean, the issue here is about nationalism. It's about Apple's brand image maybe being hurt in China because of the trade war. We just saw a very good story earlier this morning, I believe it was Bloomberg, calling attention to the U.S. companies that are the most vulnerable to Trump's ongoing kind of crusade against China. It's Apple, it's Nike, it's even Marvel, which of course is owned by Disney to an extent because Marvel launches so many of those superhero movies in China. But more than any other, it's Apple right now. And I think that those who tried to kind of lessen that narrative of how concerned Apple investors should be about China, they're starting to look a little bit wrong, especially, I mean, you led the show today by pointing out that President Trump yet again yesterday was saying, we're not quite there with China. It could be a while. Some people now are saying that it could take years for this really to play out completely. And China is the #3 region for Apple for iPhone sales after the U.S. and Europe. But I believe at one point recently it was the fastest growing. So it's really hard to diminish the impact here of the China-U.S. trade war for Apple.
Yeah, and just, I mean, going even beyond that, in addition to tariffs, one thing that the city said that stuck out to me was that iPhone is steadily less desirable just in terms of a brand image. So not even so much as in terms of backlash here, they're boycotting U.S. companies, but just the fact that, hey, it's not as cool as some of the other phones that are available on the market right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It's not just about the trade war, although I do think that's a big part of it, and that the longer that drags on, that hurts all U.S. companies trying to do business in China, which Apple is one of them. But I also think it's that Apple, starting maybe a couple years ago, you could argue, we've discussed this when they had the last rollout where they revealed the 8 at the same time as the X, we're supposed to call it the 10, but kind of cannibalizing its own new phone rollouts. And especially, I think we've seen recently that every time there's a new Apple phone, it only looks incrementally superior to the previous phone. And so we've seen the numbers on this. We know that people are less and less motivated to upgrade their phones. There used to be a time when you see the new iPhone on stage, Tim Cook holds it up, or way back when Steve Jobs, and he said, I am going to buy that the second it comes out. Of course I need the new phone. People don't feel that way anymore. We've seen Apple have to offer more and more incentives to upgrade the phone, trade-in offers, things like that. So all of that is hurting the image in China. And I do think that the crusade against Huawei is going to maybe only help Huawei in China if it becomes a kind of nationalist fervor thing.
Yeah, and not only that, but then also just the sheer price of it when you compare it to a lot of the other phones that are made in China. I mean, Apple's iPhone could cost 3 or 4 times as much as some of the options that are out there too. So then that begs the question as to whether or not the price tag is really justified for these phones.
Right, and when Apple launched the 10, the X as some people call it, a lot of people said, wow, this is evidence that Apple can kind of charge whatever it wants and the sky's the limit. And look at average selling price. Maybe that wasn't the case because there has to be a ceiling on the price, especially if the phones aren't so wildly impressive with each new iteration.
Yes, that certainly is true. All right, Dan, thank you.